What's up? This is Rebel Radio.
What up? What up? This is DJ Newmark.
This is Peanut Butter Wolf.
It's your boy. It's okay.
Keep checking out Rebel Radio.
Rebel Radio.
This is Rebel Radio.
We're in the place right here. Rebel Radio is going down.
Would you say Rebel Radio?
Oh, wait. Let's do it again.
Rebel Radio.
Welcome back to Rebel Radio. We are all over the web. RebelRadio.net, Facebook, Twitter. Anything you can think of, we're there, except for all the other channels. We're not on any of those. But welcome. It's our Rebel Radio show. I got a special 2-for-1 for you this week. Kevin Kerslake is the director of a new documentary, As I Am, The Life and Times of DJ AM. DJ Kevin Scott is his co-producer. And they come in and talk about this film about, the life of one of the most influential DJs of our time and, how the movie came together and what it meant to them personally. Kevin Kerslake is a long-time, highly acclaimed music video director. Kind of made his jump from the alternative rock world into now hip-hop with this AM project. And he's going to talk about his journey and what this film means to him personally. Kevin Scott's going to give us some insights into the creative process, making a film like this, as well as everything else he does. He says his rule is don't sugarcoat it. If you got something to say, get it out there. I hope you enjoy the interview. I really hope you enjoy the movie. I think it's fantastic. You'll hear in the interview, I knew AM kind of off and on over the years, and I think this movie does a fantastic job really telling his story. I hope you'll check it out at djamdoc.com. And now let's hear the interview with Kevin Kerslake and Kevin Scott. Nice. Well, welcome to the show. I appreciate you guys coming out. Kevin Kerslake, Kevin Scott. We're going to talk about the documentary that you guys just worked on, As I Am, about the life of DJ AM. And then I want to get into a little bit of your backgrounds and how you got to that point and, learn a little bit more about you along the way. But thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, thanks for having us.
Got to see the movie at the LA premiere. It was fantastic. It was, hugely emotional. And, I think as evidenced by, it was just a really interesting experience. I mean, the film was great. I know you guys had a kind of a Q&A at the end, and no one had any questions, which I imagine was I felt uncomfortable for you on stage, but I kind of got it sitting there because I think, it was just heavy, like fun at times too, but, it was heavy. And then, but then everyone, we went outside in the lobby and it was like a party and it was, a really good time. And it's funny, personally, I woke up the next morning feeling all those emotions. Like it didn't really hit me at night. But the next day, I was like, fuck, this is, I just went through some shit.
Yeah.
And I can imagine what that was like for you guys.
Did you know AM?
Yeah, so AM played one of the first clubs that I promoted, which was 95. It was a little sort of shitty night at Bar One back then. I was kind of just getting started in that business, but and then we sort of kept in touch. We weren't friends, but we just sort of knew each other, around the way. And whenever we saw each other, and I kind of followed his career from afar and respected everything he did.
Going back to the Q&A part was kind of tricky. We had a lot of talks about how we wanted how we wanted to sort of end it, because the movie ends at such a heavy place, and should we wait for the credits to roll all the way out, and will people leave the theater, and all of these elements, trying to figure out the best way to do that.
Yeah.
And before, I think when we did the other screenings, they would cut the credits like right away, and the lights would come up.
Oh yeah. And
it sort of, I think, after talking to Kevin about it, he felt like it was a little bit of an injustice to the emotional part of the movie. Mm-hmm. So I think the decision was made to just let it roll all the way out and let people have that few minutes, Yeah. So so we found out the result of that, which was basically people pretty quiet at the end.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, it's fine. Totally
Absolutely.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's actually was the desired outcome, right?
Well, I think when you're watching it alone at home or in a theater, you never have the opportunity to ask questions or
Right.
talk to people. So
Yeah.
I think that was the end game. Is just you want to leave people thinking about a movie
Mm-hmm.
and not getting onto some other conversation. Even though we're going to talk about the movie, it's still operating on that level after seeing the movie. I think is difficult. And
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I knew I'd have questions, but I figured I'd hold them for today.
There you go. There you go.
So, but why'd you make this movie?
Well, a number of reasons actually drew me to AM's story. I think that the obvious one is his skills, his musical skills. I think his passion for music. We all live in the music industry, and I think that it's pretty intoxicating actually to meet people or talk to people or even just explore people who are so passionate about music and the arts and its ability to impact consciousness and behavior and all those things. So I think that was an operative plane throughout the entire process. I think that his trajectory, as a dot moving through the universe and sort of the ups and downs that he experienced, I think were probably more dramatic than most people. So, I think that the dramatic and the comedic actually aspects of his story are pretty unique to him. I think that just the fact that he was able to plow through some pretty incredible situations, family situations, addictions, substance abuse, and as well as just sort of blazing a trail through the industry at a time when DJs really weren't. They were in the back room.
Mm-hmm.
They're stuck in the corner. And
Right.
as Anthony Bellinger said, he's like, they could have been a tape playing. They didn't have that sort of profile. So, I think AM was largely responsible for changing that, and what that did to club culture and pop culture in general. I think that's a pretty incredible story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The tragic proportions of his life, they had a personal connection to me. I think just because we in the arts and entertainment industry, it's where a lot of the misfits end up. Incredibly talented people, in whatever medium, but it's that talent's not necessarily nourished by perfect circumstances in somebody's life. They are challenged or sort of nuclearized in a way because of some challenging circumstances in their life, and they push forward the arts because of those, as a reaction to some of those circumstances that they're going through, and I think that a lot of times, too many times, it ends up in tragic endings.
Yeah.
And having lost a lot of friends and even people that I don't know but admired to those same circumstances, I was intrigued about getting into the forensics of those types of stories. There are some common elements with all those stories. So I wanted to explore that in a way that hadn't necessarily been explored before. When, there are certain biographies about all those people that really put them up on the pedestal, but they don't really get into the nuts and bolts of how it ended up that way.
Yeah, so I want to talk about those common elements a little bit. I know, so your background, you're a rock guy. We don't have time to list all of your credits because it's only an hour show. But you made, I would say, a big chunk of the important music videos from the early 90s, the alternative music era with Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots and Queens of Stone Age. And then, some documentaries with some of those folks as well, right? You made a Nirvana documentary.
Yep.
And so, notably, you've worked with Kurt Cobain, with Scott Weiland, and now with AM. So can you talk about those common points?
Yeah, I think. Well, it's all it all starts with the family, I think, and if they were missing something at home, or they were abused at home, or something wasn't just hitting it right. And a lot of times actually that happened to be sort of in their genetic makeup. It wasn't even just environmental. It was the fact that they were OCD or ADHD, and I mean, I can't even think of one person I know who doesn't have ADHD who works in this industry. So it's like those are all things that we're familiar with and we wrestle with, to be honest, on a day-to-day basis. So that's why I think that some of the bonds that maybe I've had with musicians is so close, is because there's an understanding of just each other's psyche. But I think that when you explore a lot of the artists that I work with, their lyrics, there's always something tragic, I think, in the artists, I think, that I really like, or a particular insight into the human condition that is able to illuminate, some discrepancies between, what they're saying and maybe what a mainstream perception of certain things are, and they're incredibly personal as well. So I think that the level of insight that they had into themselves, and that AM actually had into himself, and it doesn't come out in lyrics for him, but it comes out in certain speeches that he gave, that we have in the movie. That's I think that sort of drive that to for self-knowledge and just to grasp the universe. I think that it's the artists that I was lucky enough to work with, they had a particular gift for that, and how to turn a phrase and that is what connected, I think, them to so many millions of people, is that they were just able to articulate something that just hit this chord in people that maybe people didn't even know what it was, but it just, they spoke for that many people. Yeah. And I think in a weird way, like the ADHD element, it shows up. It obviously shows up in pretty abrasive music, right? It's like sure. Whether it's song structure or whatever, and I think that actually was expressed in AM sets as well. He bounced. He was a pinball, just and that dialectic between genres and themes and things like that was pretty interesting to explore, actually, in the edit.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, as a DJ, there was a certain restlessness, I think, to AM, and something came out in the movie that I had never thought about, and there was a scene where he essentially started a fight in the club by playing certain records. And Kevin, I'm sure you've had the experience of being able to move a crowd to certain emotions or certain kind of behaviors.
I think we kind of say, Jackson James says, he, when it came to the dance floor, he was a puppet master. And, he certainly had that way to either make it really fun or really aggressive or whatever it was that he was after. And, I think the way that he knew how to combine musical elements to create that kind of emotion was, a revelation, really. Yeah. And the first time I saw him do certain things and create a certain type of energy in a room, and I'd already been DJing for a long time, and to see that actually happen with just the way he was manipulating things was pretty awesome. I mean, it's one thing to play certain songs in a row and create a theme or a certain sound you're looking for, but to take that and elevate it to the point where you're actually controlling the way people feel in the room, and you're mixing quickly, and you're precise, and you're sending a specific message. Yeah. At least for me, I had never seen anything like that until I saw AM.
Well, it's interesting. So, let's talk about you a little bit, and I know you're a successful DJ, and I haven't seen you play live, but I've seen some of your stuff online, and you're great.
Thanks.
And
I'm also retired. But
right,
yeah.
retired. You may be our first retiree on the show. So
Yeah.
we're going to talk about that a little bit. But you know what stands out to me, and you know, I've known a lot of DJs, you know, over my career, and some of them really well, and I think, you know, the skill set for the most part is relatively narrow, meaning most DJs can kind of do more or less the same thing, right?
Yeah, give or take. Yeah,
Give or take, right?
The skill sets are the
That's
same.
a
You're right.
generalization, but
Right.
but it's relatively narrow skill set, maybe compared to other professions. But you know, a lot of the innovation happens, from my observation, happens when one guy just shows other people something that maybe they hadn't thought of or didn't realize they could do.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things had to go right for Adam, and they did. And I think, you know, coming into the mid 2000s, when I was playing in clubs, it was pretty much everybody was just playing hip hop. That was all anybody was playing.
Yeah.
And people were kind of afraid to break that comfort barrier of only playing hip hop. I actually remember I had a long time gig that I'd done for like 10 plus years, and I remember playing a Prince record at this club, and they were so used to hip hop that they were like pissed off at me. You know, it's like,
Right.
what's this guy doing?
Yeah.
Adam had really sort of shifted that entire thing because he was playing complete open format, and doing it in a really cool way and in a hip hop way. So he was capturing that part of the audience, and then also the other people that he was playing to, and that style was not popular at that point. Nobody really knew about it, especially outside of the LA area. Nobody really was aware of this, and I think we touch on it in the movie. You know, he did that mix for Power 106, and it was like the middle of the day, and it was supposed to be like up in the club, what he's playing up in the club. And, you know, he was really apprehensive about that because, you know, Power was playing nothing but hip hop and R&B.
Right.
And he was going to go on there and play Leonard Skinner and Neil Diamond and, you know, all this stuff that he had been playing. And he was going to do it in a cool way, but he was nervous about it. And we'd spent like a couple days making edits because Adam never played clean versions of anything. Everything he played was explicit version, right? Yeah. So we had to make, a lot of these songs didn't have, you know, clean versions, or he just didn't have the time to get them all together. So we were editing this stuff together to take it there. And, you know, because I did a lot of like editing at that time, so I was kind of helping him with that. And we were driving there, and this is something that like never really happened for him. He got super nervous about it, and he didn't want to go. He wanted to turn the car around, and he's like, I can't do this. It's going to be whack, you know. And I'm like, no, you know, you have to do this. Like, this is important, you know, for our profession, you know, for people to hear that there's a whole other style, because internet wasn't the way it is now. You couldn't just share it on your Facebook page or whatever. That didn't exist. So he went and he did it, and I had texted my buddy, Jerry, shout out to White Matic, he's my buddy, and he had a big old antenna and everything, and I said, you know, so he had like perfect reception. I said, can you record this mix? It's from 3 to 5, just record it, and, you know, I just wanted to have it, basically. Yeah. And so he recorded it, and then we ended up uploading it to a Serato forum board where every DJ was, and people completely lost their mind because they had, you know, everybody was playing the same 100 songs, and here's this thing that is just completely different. And I really feel that moment for the DJ culture at that particular time shifted everything. I mean, it completely changed the game and opened up a whole, you know, a whole wave of open format music for like the next, we were in that phase for 5-6 years. And I really think it's, you know, there's other guys that were doing it, but that particular mix that came out and hit, you know, kind of hit the internet really put us in that trajectory. And Adam was, you know, he was the biggest guy, and he was the coolest guy, and you could easily access him. You could look him up, and you could see him, you know, with you know, celebrities, and you could see that he was really doing it and doing huge parties. And so I think all of the younger DJs, impressionable people, they saw that, and it really kind of just changed everything.
There are a lot of people actually on when you go to the message boards too that didn't believe that was actually he was doing it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I spent many hours defending him.
Is that right?
No, I was 100% live, you know, and people didn't want to, you know, people didn't even know what a mashup was at that point or anything really, and it was sort of it was a complete re-education. Yeah.
So how did you guys connect, and tell us about how you got involved with the film?
Kevin and I. So he'd been working on the movie, and Jonathan Schechter, Shaky Green was involved at that time, and I was in regular contact with him. We're friends, and I kind of was like, so what's up? What's up with the movie? Like I haven't heard anything, and I guess he's been working on it for like 6 months at that point or something. And as it turned out, he was going in chronological order.
Yeah.
With his interviews. So he hadn't got to me. I'm sort of towards the end.
Right.
And so I just reached out to him, and we set up an interview, and we sat down, and I think we did like 3 hours or so. It was pretty long.
First time, yeah.
And then we got to talking kind of after it, and he's like, I really would love to have this stuff too. So he came back the next day, and we did another.
Whenever you wrap the cameras, it's always like then the stories come out. So you have to keep everything set up, even though you think you're faking, like you're actually boxing things up.
So we did
Mr.
a
Scott
couple
was
days.
rolling through all this.
yeah, I was. So it's funny. It's like you gotta loosen up and get going.
Right,
I think right towards the end, I was feeling real comfortable with him. Because it's like the first time you meet somebody, and you're kind of getting used to the whole process. Plus, you have everything in your face and.
Kind of like this here.
Yeah, I hadn't done a lot of those at that point, so I was kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
But then we did a second day, and then I would just check in with him. How's it going? I was very curious about the project. I wanted it, to be representative of my friends. So we kept checking in, and I think it's fair to say he and I get along pretty good. And so we just kept talking, and then eventually he asked me to come on board as a co-producer and help with some other elements like the music end of it, and so we would just get together and work on the movie, and I would try to give him insight, and that's pretty much how it started.
Kevin has been invaluable throughout the whole process. I mean, I came to him late, but I had a ton of other material that I was getting through which explains basically why the process is so slow.
Sure.
I got AM's laptops, and there was something like 50 to 70,000 stills on there, and 5 to 10,000 videos, and other documents, and he lived a pretty full life, and he had his foot on the gas every single day. So, but Kevin, he really knew AM in and out. I think musically he was really attuned to, what he did sort of on the evolutionary scale that distinguished AM from others, going backwards and forwards actually, and so he's just an encyclopedia. He has mind is a steel trap, so he knows every single set, and I think that he also really wanted to make sure that the integrity of the film was what Adam deserved, and he kept me on my toes, and also just illuminated a lot of stuff that was maybe a question in my mind, or just I needed backup or something like that, and so the scope of the story, I think that Kevin grasps, the intimate as well as the sort of this not the superficial level, but the sort of the story that everybody needs to know, as well as the intimate details of how Adam got to where he did.
Yeah.
I think I spoke up a lot. Like if there was something I felt strongly about, I'd make a case for it. And I think that Joel and Kevin really respected that. Yeah. And these two guys, they're the type of guys that they will 100% hear you out. And we had a lot of very productive discussions, I feel like, about how we were presenting certain things and how it would turn out. And, that all goes to just trying to make the best movie possible, which was 100% my number one goal with the whole thing. I wanted it to feel like Adam and to have that respect for who he was. And there's many aspects to that. It's not just as a DJ,
Right, yeah.
So
does that come naturally to you to just kind of say what's on your mind and fight for what you're...
Yeah, I
because I can imagine you're working with a director who's experienced, and
we started off
a huge
pretty
track record, and
I sort of felt out the process. I feel like a little bit. I would say something if I really wanted to say something, I would bring it up to him. But I just think as the relationship evolved with Kevin and with the editor Joel Marcus, as that relationship evolved and you get to know people, you sort of feel like you can say more. You can be direct. And Joel actually was the one that kind of really pushed that. Like, don't sugarcoat it. Like Kev's the same way. Don't don't sugarcoat it. If you got something you want to say, just say it. So that kind of opened up the door for me to really, if I felt strongly about something, then I would say something. But, I don't want to paint a picture that there was a bunch of things wrong that I had to fix or anything. I mean, they had the story pretty much right. But if there was certain things, I would definitely speak up.
I mean, when you're doing a doc, there's so many different. It's operating on so many different levels. You've obviously got that person's life, and then you want you want all the facts to line up. You want it to be completely true and accurate. And if there are bigger lessons to draw from certain things, whether it's artistically, in terms of what he's doing in music, or the impact of his addiction, or his, some of the skeletons in his closet on him, and how other people might, find a toehold in that connects with them personally, then those opportunities sort of give you a little license to explore. But I think that in terms of having the facts down, it's imperative, obviously, if you're doing a bio on somebody, that you're operating from that level, and having the people in his universe, whether it's family or friends, sometimes you can get into situations where somebody's so close to them that they don't recognize other parts. Like there are dear friends of Adam's who had no idea that he went through some of the shit that he went through, and of course, and wouldn't believe it, and wouldn't even believe necessarily the impact that it had on him later on in life, which was instrumental in sort of disarming his ability to fight back against certain things, and lose those battles. But if you trace the DNA from some of those things all the way back, you find some episodes early on in his life that were catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic. And somebody who's just knows the glory days, they're not going to have any idea or even any impulse to even look for that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we tend to glorify people, and especially people that have passed, right? And we you paint the rosy picture in memory, which is understandable, but to your point, and I think the movie really gets into that almost from the opening, right? It hits you with some of those catastrophes that happened early on.
And the plane crash.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Which happened late.
Yeah.
And people still didn't even recognize. I mean, that happened 11 months before he died.
Right.
People don't. I mean, Cosmo Baker says, "Do you know anybody who survived?" I don't know anybody who survived a plane crash. And we don't. I mean, there's no way that we can really even imagine the impact of something like that on somebody.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people around him, well-intentioned people, this is not to, put anybody on blast, but people just weren't able to imagine the impact of it on him, and then do things or manage things that enabled him to maybe get around some of those issues, So
he was very strong-willed too, so that plays a role as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the themes that stood out to me in the movie was he was painted as an obsessive, right? And it if I would do the injustice of telling the story, right, like he was obsessive about his drug use, and then he was obsessive about record collecting, sneaker collecting, his craft as a DJ, his performance schedule, right? Like whatever he
literally
did.
Everything.
Yeah. So how important is that to be successful in this line of work?
I think it's what, you can have a good career or you can have a great career. And I think it's how much you sink into it. I think it even plays to even some of the smaller parts in the movie where it just talks about that one summer where that's all he did, locked himself in a room. I don't think he had any grand vision really at that point other than I'm going to put everything into this. And that's kind of how he did it. And I think, I think Kevin touched on it before. I mean, that guy was so busy. He did so much every single day. He'd be like, come out, let's hang out today. Go up to his house. It was supposed to be like him and I hanging out or whatever, right? Yeah. And this was one of his lighter scheduled days. He had a million things going on. Oh, hold on 1 second. Let me go take care of this. And I got to call so-and-so. And I'm like, man, this guy's like, but it was always like that, you know? And I just think he wanted to just do as much as possible, you know, bring it on. And, you know, he did that. And I think it had a lot to do with his success because he was just not afraid to put in the work, not afraid to fill his schedule, not afraid to say no to certain things, to the positive and the detriment, you know? So I think it played a big role for him.
It's funny. I you know, thinking about having kids and how you'd be as a parent and then you start to think about how your parents perceived you as a kid or me as a kid. You know, I'd be in the darkroom for 36 hours straight. I would be in an edit for 7 days straight. I'd be sleeping under the edit table and, you know, order food in, get a couple hours of sleep on the linoleum floor, wake up, oh my God, I got to keep cutting. And then it's like, and then I just basically collapse at some point later on in the day. And a lot of times you're just sitting on your bed with headphones on, completely blowing out your ears, or playing guitar for hours on end. Yeah. And, you know, if somebody peeked into your room, they can just think that you're just fucking off and just wasting time, right? But it's like that, there was an obsessive quality. And I think that anybody basically who is in a band that succeeds, or even maybe doesn't succeed, doesn't have that, you know, the stars just don't align, but they are still just as committed. That drive, I think, is imperative to have if you're going to do anything. I mean, a lot of times it's just stroke of luck, and you know, maybe somebody's, you know, got perfect bone structure and shit just happens, and, you know, and
the right family,
perfect right doctor, you know, whatever. Yeah, it's like and they get pushed, you know, into the sweet spot. But yeah, drive is a funny thing, you know, in terms of because it expresses itself in so many different ways. And really only the person who's like right in the pocket in the driver's seat, he doesn't even know where it's going, but he knows that it's you know, he's answering the call right now, or she's answering the call right now.
So with that in mind, and we sort of touched on this earlier, but how much do you think that drive and addiction are linked?
Because I'm not, my grandfather died of alcoholism. And I know a lot of people in that world. I don't personally, you know, I can't speak to like where, you know, those things sort of.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess the
you're
science
not a doctor,
of it.
right?
But I asked everybody that I interviewed, you know, where who was dialed into that world, you know, where does the line? Because everybody is, I mean, in this world anyway, it's, you know, there's a recreational use, you know, where does recreational use turned into substance abuse? Right. And for almost, you know, to the person, it was, you know, it really depends on what's going on before, like what they've inherited. Yeah. And I think that, you know, the ferocity of that issue, whether it's a mommy or daddy issue, or, you know, just not getting the attention, or being hurt, you know, by abuse, you know, like concussed, or, you know, some sort of, it just seems like it seems so arbitrary and so random, and it's interesting because a lot of the science about addiction is that it exists in the genetic makeup. Right. There is a story in the film, or a question in the film, about Adam's paternal roots, you know, whether his addicted father is actually his father, and if it's not, then it's just completely, it's the science of that is not necessarily genetic, but it's environmental as well. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is, but it's incredibly sad. I mean, we just lost Scott Weiland, you know, to it's like the regularity of this story is so depressing, in a way, and you really have to admire the fight. I know that people who endure those sorts of issues, they fight it every single day. You have to fight it on a day-to-day basis, and they're you know, the tenacity that's required. It's pretty legendary, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you mentioned it, but kind of take us back to those days on the linoleum floor. Like, how'd you get started as a filmmaker, and what drew you to that?
It's funny, actually. I I grew up partly in L.A. and then I moved to Mammoth in junior high. And my parents and I ski raced and did all the stupid action sports basically that you would do as a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ski, surf, snowboard. And one Christmas, my parents gave us kids. I have a brother and sister. They gave us all Super 8 camera. I hijacked that and started doing ski films and skate films and this is junior high and high school basically, and cutting them up. They wouldn't even necessarily be shown anywhere, but I still have all the reels at home and
Cool.
I'd race, go back, grab my camera, go back up, shoot all my friends that are coming down the
No
course.
GoPro back then.
No GoPro, yeah. It's Super 8 film,
Yeah.
right? So I just kept on that course. I was actually in a couple Warren Miller films that he shot in Mammoth, and it wasn't even a conscious thing, but I knew that dude had a cool job, traveling around the world, narrating his films, and so I basically just started on a trajectory, basically following his path, and then at one point, just totally by mistake or by accident, I got into doing narrative films and experimental films, and won a Student Academy Award for the region for California, and then just got pulled into music videos again, like completely by accident. Like every single thing that happened in my, I guess my film career was almost by accident, even though I always had a camera in my hand. But
What was your first music video?
First music video I did for Sonic Youth, Shadow of a Doubt. Yeah, really lucky. Kim was in a movie that I was doing. Kim Gordon, one of the singers for Sonic Youth. So we were doing a movie, and then there was like 10 seconds of black in this section that we were doing, and the band is like, that's a really good place for some band footage to go. And it was one of her Speak Sing songs, so we just threw them some VHS footage, totally terrible quality, and it worked, and it basically became a closet classic on MTV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, do you remember that feeling of your first paid gig or getting that paycheck for making your art?
Yeah, it's sort of like, the people are going to pay me for this?
Yeah.
And it's funny, I know a lot of people actually capitalize on that. I didn't do that. I was like, whoa, shit, that just means I have more money. If somebody's going to pay me, that means I can actually have a higher budget, because I can put my money into getting a crane or getting a helicopter, something. I always just sort of threw it back into the mix.
Yeah.
And I wasn't doing. The bands that I was doing were all like, they were the brats at the labels, right?
Right.
They had to do music videos because contractually they were obligated to, but they weren't getting the Motley Crue budgets or the Bon Jovi budgets or anything like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I stayed away from hair like that.
So, and when was there a moment when you realized, like, this is my career now? Like, I'm going to do this.
I just never considered anything else, to be honest. Yeah, it was just. I went to film school, so there was definitely a commitment at that level. Just, I think, to the arts, photography. I'd spent a lot of time in the darkroom as well and shoot stills.
Yeah.
So I really didn't do anything else. I read a lot. I shot. And I basically just lived around film somehow, and surfed and skied and snowboarded, and it's a good life.
Yes. Nice. Kevin Scott, how'd you get started DJing, and what was your first gig?
I think it's in my blood, because my dad was a DJ. He did like high school parties playing 45s in the 50s.
Wow.
So I think it's sort of in my blood. But yeah, exactly. Well, I back in like the early 80s, I used to have. We called them ghetto blasters. I don't know what the proper name is for them, but I had one of those dual deck with the pause button. Boombox, yeah. And I used to just make pause tapes off the radio, and I was real into it, and I kind of liked the way things fit together. And then I have a brother, and he's 10 years older than me, and he got married. I was in his wedding. It was the first time I ever saw some of the DJ mix two records together, and I looked at my dad, and I was like, "That's what I want to do." I was like 14, and my dad, he was a banker and a lawyer. That's what he ended up being, and he kind of was trying to teach me a lesson. And he's like, "Okay, so this is how we're going to do it," because he was, my parents were pretty successful at that point. So we'll buy you the equipment. Every gig you do, you pay back 50%. Like basically trying to teach me a life lesson essentially, but giving me also a chance to see if I really did want to do this. And so I got the equipment. I started doing gigs. I did them all through high school, up through college, and I went to college to be a lawyer like my dad and take over his practice. And he had some illness at that point. He had a stroke, and it was like a real eye-opening experience for me. And I kind of put everything on hold, and I was like, let me try to do this music thing and see if I can make this work, because I really like this. This is what keeps me up at night. This is what wakes me up in the morning. And I don't know about this lawyer stuff. Like, this doesn't look like a good ending, And so I just started pursuing it. And I think my first gig was like just a high school backyard party. I was terrible. Back then it took time. There was no tutorial on YouTube, and there was like really you had to learn all your records. You had to get money together to buy them. You had to learn how to use the equipment. I mean, it was tough.
Were you conscious of the fact that it was terrible?
It made me want to get better. Yeah. I mean, you go to a party and things don't work out the way they do in your head prior to the party. You have a certain expectation and it doesn't happen, and you go, I need to get better. And
then when was the first time what was the first gig where you felt like you'd gotten there?
So I started in, like officially in like 88. I think around like the early 90s, rave music became really popular, and I really loved it. Like, I was super into that stuff. And
like, what were you playing?
I remember like when Human Resource Dominator came out, that kind of music, which was like really aggressive, techno, like basically. It was like aggressive stuff, and it was all coming from the UK, and it was like really eye-opening music to me, and I was interested in it. So I would just spend all my money on those records, and I would just practice like crazy. I think it really took, the right style of music for me. And then I remember practicing mixing like hours and hours on end until I got good at it. And it was right around that time I started doing, more parties, and by then I was just starting college. So I made a conscious effort to like get involved with the fraternities and stuff and start doing their parties. And if you can do a frat party where anything goes, and you can get through that and rock it, everything else feels pretty easy, because it's really no rules, So that's basically kind of how I started, and then I just never really wanted to grow up. Never really wanted to stop. I was like, I like this. Like, this is for me.
Yeah.
And I just kept at it, and eventually it turned into something really good for me.
And was it just like, was there a big break, so to speak, or was that just like a little step each time?
There was a big break, but there was a lot of incremental breaks before that. So, you kind of go through. I think like in the mid 90s, I got my first club gig, and that was consistent money, and it was at a quality place, and it was like,
where was that?
Well, it was in Orange County. It was called Off Campus Pub. It was right across from Cal State Fullerton, and they had like a Thursday night there, and it was like a college night. And I kept playing there every week, and eventually built it up to where there was like a line around the block. And a lot of that was cheap drinks, but I like to think I had a little something to do with it.
Sure.
But, we built that up, and that was like, that was like my first real gig where it was really solid. And then from there, I just kept trying to do more stuff. The big break came when I met Adam, I think. That was a real education.
How'd you meet?
So I was making records. I got into basic production. I was making vinyl records for DJs, and it was a company I was trying to start, and I was shipping them all over. And one of the things I did was I shipped them to all of the radio guys, especially the LA radio guys. So I knew Vice and some of these other guys, and I was sending them the records. And Vice hit me up one day, says, "Hey, my buddy AM, he wants to get some of your records," because he'd been buying them, and AM liked free shit. So he's like, put me in contact with that guy.
Sure.
Let me get some free records.
So what kind of records were you making?
They were like compilation records. So they had like intro, outros and then I did like some party breaks,
like
and some
Ultimix
blends
kind of stuff.
Yeah, I had a company that basically had like 6 different labels. So we did Fat Wax, Reruns, Fill in the Gap, Crate Savers. Like, we had a whole line of different, and each record was a little bit different in style. Yeah. And so I was making all of those and pressing them and distributing them. And I mean, it was a real, that ate up all my time that I wasn't DJing. I was doing that. And he wanted the records, and so I was like, I hadn't heard of him. I didn't know who he was, right. Because like again, we talk about their social media wasn't like, you didn't know who he was, and Vice was like, trust me, this is the guy you want to take care of. So we drove out to meet him, and he's larger than life. He was larger than life, like his personality, the way he was, everything about him, that big booming voice and that charisma, I was like, this guy's pretty cool. Brought him out a box of records. He gave tickets to like a Jay-Z after party. He's like, here you go, bro, come down, you know. And from there, AOL Instant Messenger was what basically fueled our friendship. We would stay up all night talking on AOL Instant Messenger, sending music. MP3s was, pretty new. But we were sending music back and forth. Like we were really into a lot of the same kind of stuff. 80s music. He loved rave music as well. We touch on that in the movie. And we just became fast friends. And had a lot of common interests. And also at that time he was dating Nicole Richie. And, I think a lot of his friends were single, and I was married. So I was a safe friend. So she didn't mind me coming over and hanging out with him. And so we spent a lot of time together at that point, and our friendship grew quick.
It's interesting. I like a lot of the line of what you're asking about in terms of like trying to crack the code on obsession and what those things are that really turned on. It helped evolve or accelerate. Adam practiced like a motherfucker, and I think that even going back to that, your first gig and other things that we all experience, throughout, there are some black and blue days, and that's why actually sports as an analogy might even be action sports. Like when you first start to snowboard, it's there, you're bruised, so bruised,
I know, that's why,
and every time you get up,
quit.
it's like, that's awesome. And, and
yeah.
It's just this weird dichotomy where, you're getting the shit beat out of you, but it's such a charge,
So
and
when did that happen for you as a filmmaker?
I think it's funny. My thing was seeing films, experiencing films on a way that, maybe music speaks to other people, and seeing that it can resonate in a particular way in me, and wanting to basically create those situations where I can turn on other people as well. Obviously, you never meet them in a way that you do as a musician playing live, but just being able to mess with the structure and the architecture of things, as well as the content and the themes and all those, how those things sort of synthesize, and being in a couple rooms where my films were playing and feeling that, it's like, all right, I'm onto something, and I even had when I was showing, it wasn't even my senior thesis film, but another film in a theater of, I don't know, probably like 300 or 400 people, and I got under the television head's skin. He stood up and argued with me for like half an hour, and then finally walked out
Because of something on the screen.
Yeah, because I stood by why I was doing something. It was like, he's like, you have to make film for other people, and I was like, no, I don't really. I have faith in myself. If I'm gonna dig it, I have faith that you're gonna dig it too. And it's like, that's impossible. And it was sacrilege. And in the end, the entire audience basically applauded me, and the professor walked out. So it just, like, some of those things, restore that could have gone a completely different way.
Sure.
And I was lucky, but I feel like that, wanting to music does it in a way that's just so quiet. Its impact is so quiet in a way, even though we're obviously dealing with sound, but the universal nature of just being able to connect to people, and to try to do that on film is I think one of my greatest. That's what I strive for anyway.
So that's so interesting you say that, because your career, like, don't take this the wrong way, but you're kind of a creative for hire. What I mean is, like, other than those early films, it's not like you're making stuff and then going out and trying to sell it.
Sure.
Right. So you're making music videos where the band or the label hires you in advance. You've done a ton of commercials. Correct me, but AT&T, Coca-Cola, like big brands.
Yep.
And they pay you to tell their stories, right? And so, so I'm interested in how you balance those things, right? Because if you've got this feeling that if I dig it, other people are going to dig it, and at the same time, they're your work for hire in a lot of those instances. So how does those work together?
Yeah, that balance is sometimes it doesn't work, and you get in fights and you end up taking your name off the project or whatever. But ideally you can there's a meeting of the minds, and they hire you because they know that it's no secret that certain directors are strong-willed and strong-minded, and
is that your reputation?
I'm not a screamer. I'm quietly that way, but there are other people that are more emphatic about it, I guess. And they run their sets like Napoleon, and oddly enough, that behavior is sort of rewarded in our industry, which is sort of mystifying. But
it makes you maybe seem like more of a genius because people can't work with you. Like,
yeah. There's a very strange talk about parental issues, coming out. It's like there's a pathology there that's almost universal among a particular strain of directors. But it's a funny balance, and at different times of my life, I've gravitated more towards commercials or away from them, because that's typically where those conflicts are expressed the most. Bands typically are. I can connect with bands on that level, and we see things the same way, and then we're sort of this force that's working against some of the more commercial instincts.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I started working more in the branded world, like because friends of mine were ran DC Shoes or Quicksilver or Insomniac, and then you're just working with a brand.
Yeah.
Throughout, it's not a 30-second commercial. So it's not as toxic as it can get with those sorts of jobs, and then you're really just pushing an aesthetic or a way of life,
Right.
And you're either on board with that brand or you're not in terms of what they're doing, and then the question is just how to do the best work, to push that forward.
So given that experience working with brands, what do you wish more brands understood?
I think that there are rewards in taking risks, and I think that the corporate mentality is always, you're looking for a formula. It worked for this situation or this brand, so it's got to work for us. Let's bottle some of that up and do it sort of like they did, but a little different. And instead of really looking for an original way in, that was successful because they didn't do it like anybody else did it. And so take that opportunity to repeat that. The fact that they didn't repeat anything, and I mean, there are footnotes on everything, so you can sort of you can qualify some of those comments, but I think that I think the risk-averse nature of brands and the more money there is, obviously, the more freaked out people get.
Yeah.
And it should be the opposite, I think. I mean, that's how I've conducted my life. It's like, oh, I got money now. I can take some risk. I can put it into the AM dock.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, they tend to think the stakes are higher, right? So they have to be safer.
Yes.
Yeah. I've definitely seen that.
Yeah.
So, you've been making films now for a couple decades, and I think, looking back, I looked back at some of your early stuff, and, it definitely, I think, there was that MTV style, which I think you helped to define, and how has the craft of storytelling changed? We've talked a lot about how music's changed, both on the production and consumption side. What about in film? How has that changed?
Well, it's sort of exploded, I think, in terms of the digital universe. The fact that so many people have cameras now and are adept at using them and are interested in telling stories in a particular way that's unique to them. And I think that on the distribution front, the fact that so many outlets are there now, then there's an opportunity to see, for those things to actually find the light in the universe. So, and I think that, the craft of filmmaking is, I I mean, there's some pretty incredible people making stuff now, you know, and but there's so much that, you know, you wonder about that volume. But then it's not. The only time there's I have a reaction to that is when you know, when everybody's thrown into this sort of the horse race of box office revenues and things like that, and to my mind, you know, money is one currency, but there are a lot of other currencies at work, and I think that you know, the fact that you know, the creative currency, you know, now it's good economy. I think, you know, because there's so much work, and there's, you know, the ease at which people can make stuff is pretty astonishing. Like,
and so how have your influences changed? I mean, you know, I get the sense, you know, you started making movies about something you loved, which was sports, and then presumably, you know, you're in a flannel shirt, right? So you come in looking like the grunge guy, and that was a lot of your early stuff. And so, but you know, now you've made this AM movie, and I know you did a bunch of work with Hard and with Insomniac. I'm guessing maybe not your style of music that your go-to.
Hard more than Insomniac,
okay,
for sure.
Fair enough.
I think their lineups are harder. So, and I think, you know.
So do you still, when we get in the car, like, what's in there, Sonic Youth, or what do you listen to?
There is I got the whole collection of I don't know, not necessarily bootlegs, but stuff that hadn't been released before that it gets played a lot.
Cool.
Sonic Youth.
Yeah.
But I mean, it goes all over the map, and I think actually, you know, when you're younger and you're not as efficient, you really have to do one thing at a time, work on one film for 6 months or a year or whatever. Now, you know, I can have a dozen different things going on, and I just like to wake up every day and go to sleep every day, you know, with one of those projects in my mind, and I don't have to be as locked into one as I was in the past. And yeah, I think that just being able to play in that sandbox, I think, is just, that's more what I'm into necessarily. You know, just the fact that I pick up a camera every day and shoot something, and even if just for a couple shots, you know. I guess there's back to the ADD thing. You know, it's you know, that sort of pinball aspect, I guess, of being in that world.
So, Kevin, let's talk about those pressures that Kevin was talking about to kind of conform to what's expected, right? So you are retired as a DJ, but you were telling me earlier that you know, when your career started picking up and you start traveling, there's a pressure to play a certain format, a certain type of music.
Sure.
That wasn't necessarily the stuff that you're really into.
That's right, yeah. So sort of carrying on from where we were talking about with the big break, at that time Adam kind of brought me into his world and sort of showed me the ropes and stuff, and eventually had me, when he opened LAX, just right around the corner from here, he had me as his resident DJ, which was a pretty bold choice, I feel like, for him at that time. I think he had a lot of people that were hoping to be them, and he sort of went out, you know, outside the box, took a risk like we're talking about, and went with me, and you know, that was like a first big break for me, and that led to traveling, which we were talking about a little bit earlier. And when the traveling thing started with Dexstar, when he started that whole thing, you know, we were sort of being flown to these cities as like a savior almost, right? So they have these cities where not a lot's going on. They want to showcase this new style that we've been talking about, right? And we're kind of the guys to come out there and do that. So it's kind of cool in a way, but the crowd, you know, the people booking us know about this, and that's what they want for their venue. But the crowd has no idea, right? So we would get there and try to basically do what we're doing in Hollywood or LA, and there'd be nights where it would just completely fall flat because they're looking at you like, this guy's from LA, what is he playing? Like, this is not what we're into. And you know, there was nights like that where it was like, you know, boy, I sure would like to just go back to LAX and LA where everybody knows the routine and knows what we play. And here I am in wherever, Kansas City, and they just don't get it. And I'm emptying the dance floor, you know, and you're trying to like hold that whole thing together, and there were, there's definitely some tough nights, but there was other times too in some cities where they really grabbed onto it.
Yeah.
And they were, you'd have those magical nights where the crowd got it. They understood, and they knew it was something different, and they were into it.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the fun ones. And there was plenty of those too. But you never quite knew what you were going to get.
Right. Sure.
From city to city.
So how do you balance those pressures, right? Like you're obviously, it's kind of what we're talking about, right? You're being hired for your creativity.
Right.
There's also pressure to conform to what's expected.
Right.
And, the right answer may not be obvious, or maybe somewhere in between, or maybe one way one day and one way another. Like, what's that process for you?
I mean, for me, I just try to keep in mind, like, why they wanted me there in the first place. And, maybe that enlightening for the crowd isn't going to happen the night that I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
But they want to start a process. They want something to happen there. They want to change the way things work there. So I'm a part of that process. Mm-hmm. So I just went in, with, okay, this is what they're hiring me to do. This is what I'm going to come in and do. And, it could get a little hard on you when it's not working great. But, you got to stick with the plan, basically. And for me, I tried to stay as creative as possible. But, the grind, there's nights where you're there and you're like, not this again. And you're just going to play what works.
Mm-hmm.
Because you just want it to be a good night.
Yeah.
You don't want to, get back to your, hotel room and be like, it sucked, and so there's that pressure too. Yeah. It's just a balancing act. I think a lot of it really had to do with my day that day,
mm-hmm.
Because like when you're travel DJing, you're getting up early in the morning because you're usually flying to the East Coast.
Right.
You got a time change.
Same day.
You got, it's a long day.
Mm-hmm.
You leave early in the morning and you get there and the sun's down and it's time to eat dinner and you're like, what happened to the day, And then you got to go DJ and some days you're in the mood for it and you're ready, and other days you're like, And so I guess a lot of it depended on just sort of how I felt that day, how the crowd was reacting, and
mm-hmm.
just trying to make it a balancing act, make the best of every gig that you can. And it's not easy. Honestly, it's not. I didn't find it easy. And after a bit of time when my wife got pregnant and we had a kid, and I just sort of started to kind of weigh what was more important. For me, it was a pretty obvious choice. Like, I think I'd much rather be home,
mm-hmm.
With my wife and help raise my daughter than be out here, rolling the dice every night in some small city,
Yeah.
So
before, how big did it get for you before that?
It got pretty big. I mean, we were kind of in the early travel days, so
mm-hmm.
we were getting some good gigs and good residencies. I think at one point I had like 9 residencies around the country. I was doing some big events. I was working for Harrah's, Caesars. I was doing stuff like did some Winter Olympics parties, and
nice.
it was going well.
Is there a best night that stands out to you?
Well, there.
Which
actually, I'll do a little name dropping for you. So. Before I started traveling, the best night that I remember was at LAX. Adam, I had some other gig, and he's like, I really need you to do the Sweet 16 at LAX.
mm-hmm.
And it was like on an off night. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. And then as it got closer, I was like trying to put music together. And I'd never really done a Sweet 16 in my life, so I had no idea what these kids were going to be into. And I remember texting him, and I was like, yeah, you know what, man? Can we get like somebody else to do it? Because I just don't know if like that's really in my wheelhouse, And he's like, no, you're doing it. It's for Jimmy Iovine's daughter. And I've assured him that you will do a good job.
Nice.
And at that point, I was petrified, like,
mm-hmm.
oh my God,
Yeah.
So I'm trying to put this thing together. So we get there, and it seemed unusually tight there. Well, come to find out, the Secret Service were there because Arnold Schwarzenegger, the then governor, was there to sing "Happy Birthday" to Jimmy's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So
can you do that? Can I? Let's hear how that sounds.
What's that?
How did that sound?
Do a little well, rendition. he just sort of, yeah. I don't do impressions, but he just kind of kicked it off, and then they jumped into it, and then immediately following that, like Jimmy's assistant came over and said, "Can you please play Family Affair by Dr. Dre and Mary J. Blige?" And I was like, "Sure, no problem. That's a crowd pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
No big deal." So they get done with Happy Birthday, and I kind of get the cue. I start the record, and I'm turning around like looking for other stuff to play in my laptop. And my buddy who's with me, he taps me on the shoulder. He goes, "You got to look at the middle of the dance floor." And I look up, and it's Dr. Dre and Mary J. Blige dancing together to the record they made, and like 250 16-year-olds around them, going nuts.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That was without question the most surreal thing I've ever seen as a DJ. Like I just tried to take a snapshot in my head of that moment, because I was like, it's really probably not going to get much cooler than this.
Yeah.
And it never really did.
That's pretty high bar.
Never really did. The only other thing that was really cool one time was LAX. A lot of cool stuff happened with celebrities and stuff. But my brother is, like I mentioned before, he's 10 years older than me. So I grew up with a lot of classic rock in the house. Very much into like AC/DC, Alice Cooper, Van Halen, Rush, like all that kind of stuff. So I had a kind of a jump start on music. So I was really into that stuff because that was the 70s, with my brother. And
is there one song that stands out?
One song? Oh man, I'm the guy that can't narrow it down that well.
But thinking back then, was there a song at the time?
Tom Sawyer.
Okay.
Yeah, without question, Tom Sawyer. Yeah, now that you say that, yeah, Tom Sawyer probably. That was the song. So I was DJing at LAX again, and I get a tap on the shoulder, and I turn around, it's David Lee Roth. And I was kind of, at that point, I'd been playing there for a while, and I wasn't really getting very starstruck anymore. Because there was a lot of people showing up, Prince and Jamie Foxx and all these other people. But David Lee Roth was not somebody I expected to be standing there. And he's like...
He didn't seem like a clubber.
No. He wasn't like, he wasn't at the clubs all the time. And I was like, I turn around and I must have had this look on my face like, holy crap, Yeah. And he goes, hey, man, I really like what you're doing with them turntables. And I was like, wow, there's an impression by him. And I was like, wow, thanks, and we took a picture together. I said, I normally never ask for that stuff, but I was like, can we take a picture together? Because nobody's going to believe this, And we took a picture together, and then he looks at me and he goes, okay, I want you to do the Diamond Dave face. And we did the open mouth, like, the big open mouth face. You can't see it on the podcast, but.
We're taping.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And he did the big open mouth one, and we did that. And I still have that picture. It's in my house, and that's reminiscent of a really cool night.
That's cool.
I was definitely starstruck for sure.
So why do you think, as you said, there's a lot of guys who could have asked to be the resident. What do you think he saw in you?
I think we were really different from one another. He was very active, always scratching. Very quick. And then I think in me, he saw somebody that was very solid, very consistent. I was very much into mixing and blending records in a certain way. I think he really liked that sound. And I also think that there was the factor of, having 100 DJs that all expected or wanted the gig. And him sort of having that dilemma of like, who do I choose? I'm going to piss off the other 99 or whatever, right? But if you chose me,
off all 100.
Yeah, well, or just say I'm throwing a total curveball here. Yeah. And I do remember specifically right after I started there, there was a DJ that was in LA all the time, went by the name of Gomez. And Gomez, if you don't know him, is pretty outspoken guy. He says what's on his mind. And I guess he was there and he was like listening by the front door to my set for like an hour and a half. And he came up to me afterwards and he's like, man, I was listening to you play and I was getting pissed off. It's like I was just getting pissed off. Like, this guy is up there playing a CD. And he's like, and then I came closer and I watched you. And he goes, it was like surgical precision, just like with your mixes, you're just so clean the way you did it. And it clicked for me. Like, I got it. I figured it out. Because I think he was kind of looking at it like, why'd this guy get the gig? Like, I never even seen this guy before. Never heard of him. And I think he kind of saw what I was doing and what Adam was thinking at the time, which was, let's give LA something a little bit different. And I think that's why he chose me. And also I was I'm very much into programming. I think it's the number one most important thing. You can be the greatest scratcher or mixer in the world, but if you can't program, you're crap. I think. I mean, I think it's really about the crowd. I think it's really about playing the right records at the right time. And that was always number one for me. So programming is very interesting. And I remember going to some of Adam's gigs and questioning his programming. I was never really afraid, kind of like with the movie process, to tell him when I thought something sucked. And so I remember like kind of questioning him on it, like, why'd you play that Black Eyed Peas song, or whatever it was. Yeah. That's not a specific example. Don't be mad. But I'm just saying, like, why'd you play that specific record at that point? It seems like
we don't hate the Black Eyed Peas.
No, not at all. Not at all. No, Adam was a fan. But of the stuff while he was alive. I don't know how he feels about the stuff after. But, but anyway, he I would just question him about that, and he'd go, oh yeah, huh, like, sort of gave him a different mindset for how to put things together, because if something didn't work for him, he's like, okay, 20 seconds later I'll switch to something else, where I was more like, well, you could build way more energy if you just picked the right records during that and didn't have that 20 seconds of crap. And so I think he was interested in that. I think he had a lot of people that were playing the same kind of style as him in LA, and here's this guy and he's just nothing like me. And I think that intrigued him. He basically told me that, but I'm also expanding upon what he told me. I think that's pretty much the reason.
Yeah. Kevin Kerslake, is there a record that got you into music?
It's funny. Well, the Ventures, probably. Yeah. The Hawaii 5-0.
Wow. The Hawaii 5-0.
It's one of my first 45s.
Yeah.
But I think, early 80s in LA, that turbocharged a lot of stuff for me. X. Yeah. Actually, at that point, we'd been through the Clash and the Ramones and all that stuff. But I think that growing up with Mammoth, like, you didn't really know that, oh God, people actually go to a place and they actually play. People, all these people collect. They go see them live. Even though I had Kiss Alive too.
Do you remember? Right. Do you remember?
That's the standard answer.
Sure. Do you remember your first time seeing a DJ and being like aware that you were watching a DJ?
Yeah, it wasn't till late, actually, where I appreciated the skill set. I even saw AM at he played in a garage at a backyard party in 2000, but it still really wasn't on my mind in terms of being the center of the universe, that night.
Yeah.
And I think probably a lot of the drum and bass stuff is really what turned me on. I used to go to Raymond Roker's Science.
Yeah.
And
I probably saw you there.
That was like church for me. It was like the shit that was going on. Because there was a punk rock thing that was, that it felt like that's where those two worlds collided in a way. And before that, I was more into industrial stuff. But he didn't really have the DJ as like the scientist.
Right. Yeah.
We were in the corner, in the dark for a long time. The lighted stages. I mean, that's another part of the travel thing. I think it kind of blew my mind, was like, oh, suddenly even at LAX we were in a corner. It's like, oh, we're on, now we're on a 4-foot stage with all these lights on. I personally was uncomfortable with that. That wasn't why I got into DJing.
Yeah, I was too at the time. I was producing events, and I kind of rejected the idea that we take the DJ out of the booth. And I remember that we were doing parties for Scion, and it was Hall & Mason. I don't know if you remember those guys.
Of course,
they did this amazing 2x4 set.
Right, yeah.
And they were the first ones to kind of like demand nicely that, but they wanted people to see them.
The art of it.
Yeah, the art of it.
Right?
And I think part of it was the kind of what you said, like that people may not believe it, because 2x4 was, most people hadn't seen that. And what they were doing was really special. And so to be able to see that, but right around that time, the whole focus shifted, right, from the middle of the floor to the stage.
And I think AM played a role in that too, because you have these people that are booking him and paying him a lot of money. They don't want to put him in a corner. They want to put him front and center so that everybody can see their investment, so to speak, that they've brought this guy out because they think he's special or whatever. And I think that turned a corner and turned it into big business and made it about the show of being a DJ. And that's when the technical skills really come to the forefront. And, I remember specifically Adam telling me many times, he would send me a mix from a night and I'd be like, man, you were scratching a lot on that, more than he would maybe say it like LAX. And I'd be like, why are you scratching so much? And he goes, when they're paying you that kind of money, they're putting you on a stage and everybody's staring at you, I've got to do something with my hands.
You can't just stand there.
Right. And
we didn't know about fist bumping at the time.
No, all the stuff we're into now, he wasn't going to do that. He wasn't going to cheerlead up on.
Hadn't been invented yet.
Exactly. He was more of a heads down, let me show you some skills kind of guy. Yeah. Which I think is, a little bit missing right now, actually.
Yeah. He's the Eddie Van Halen of DJ.
You know what? That's totally true, I feel like. Yeah.
Well, I know we're almost out of time, but I have a couple more questions. So the movie is a who's who of DJing that's interviewed, and any surprises? Anyone say something that was really just surprising?
I think that was what was pretty profound was the respect, the across the board respect that people had for Adam's skills, and also what he did in terms of pivoting, pulling the DJ out of the corner, and protecting the artist by starting Dexstar and creating a management firm and really doing some brotherly work, some social work for the DJ. In that sense, he was sort of a curator for what was happening, and a manager and an agent, like all those things collectively. And I think that there wasn't a DJ that I interviewed that didn't know that and wasn't grateful. And from Diplo, Jazzy Jeff, Vice, even Paul Oakenfold, and some older dogs and Jeff was his hero, but Jeff also, he was pretty humble in terms of his praise for AM.
Yeah.
So Mixmaster Mike, I mean, it's a shame that a lot we only have one line from a lot of those guys, but it just this carousel through the who's who, like you say, of DJing. And I think that I really look forward to bottling some of those interviews up into like half-hour, 45-minute special features, bonus features, that and just letting them play in their, not necessarily in their entirety. But
Right. Well, so maybe in that line, was there a favorite moment that didn't make it into the doc?
There are a lot of funny stories, and I think that it's not even musical on my front. I think that there's something that actually Shane Powers said, and Shane's he's larger than life. He's a wild man, and he talks about AM. We all sort of are born with these spots, or we accumulate these spots throughout our life, and it's a long story, like a lot of maybe a lot of Adam's stories are in terms of the setup and the climax, but and he's talking about Adam's spots were just that he was the fat kid on the playground that's like, hey, wait up, kids. I tried so hard to fit that in, and it just felt it's gonna have to live in a special place. Yeah.
DVD extras.
That's right. And there were a few people that were conspicuously missing, and that's not to critique the film, but some people just weren't in it.
Yep.
Was there was there people that you wanted to be in the film that you couldn't get?
I think there are. Adam left pretty suddenly, and I feel like a lot of people haven't necessarily even processed the fact that he's gone.
Yeah.
With Scott Weiland and with Kurt Cobain, you can sort of. It's almost like you just see it in the cards. Like you're just dreading the day when you get that news. And I feel like with a lot of people that I was interviewing, even, it was so raw that I actually felt like that I was conveying the news that he was not with us anymore. So I think that governed some of the impulses to be in the movie or not be in the movie, about that public display, that reaction. You have to be pretty brave, and I think that to be able to step up for your the fact that you're stepping up for your friend has to transcend the fact that you may not you're breaking down a bit on camera. So there's some other things that I wasn't necessarily interested in terms of the Hollywood stuff, that I felt like we had enough material to tell, say, the Nicole story. I don't know what's going to be said that we didn't say in another way.
I'm not suggesting that.
Yeah. No.
She should have been in the film.
It's a completely valid. I mean, it's noteworthy, I guess, that some people aren't in the movie, but various reasons why that's the case.
Yeah. So what's next for the film, and what's next for you guys?
We are going to be out in theaters and digitally actually in March.
Nice.
We decided to not go to war with all the holiday movies and take some time and really sort of seed a release campaign that assures its success, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and globally as well as here in the States.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's we're really looking forward to building that campaign over the course of the new year.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then what else are you working on?
I am doing a digital series, feature-length digital series of The Wizard of Oz, actually for Warner Brothers. Yeah, they've
That's awesome.
they own the movie, so
The White Wiz, you mean?
The White Wiz.
Yeah.
It's with Tim Armstrong, actually. You probably know from he's doing the music.
Cool. Yeah.
But we're starting to cast right now, and yeah, it's a big deal. Warner Brothers never given away the songs before. There have been a
nice.
lot of Oz projects that
Yeah.
are based on the books, but you know certain things are proprietary or appear only in the movie that nobody's ever been able to play with. The songs, the ruby red slippers, you know, in the books they're silver slippers, and so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah.
Kevin, what are you up to?
Being a dad,
Mhm.
and I really enjoyed working on the movie. So if Kevin comes calling again on another project,
Nice.
I would absolutely be interested in that. It's funny. Started out just being an interview and turned into something more, and I enjoyed the process. I've enjoyed actually the whole process. It's been tough at times. It's been hard. There's a lot of things to figure out and do, but you know, I feel like we stuck together and you know we've made things work, and so I would and I have a lot of respect for him and for Joel. So I'd definitely be down to keep doing something like this. I like the process. I like the idea of making something that's lasting and interesting. And plus the fact that he mainly does music, which has basically been my life up to this point, is also interesting to me too, because you know, when I was on airplanes doing all my traveling, all I did was read rock bios and different books, basically about these types of stories that he makes. So
what book should we read?
Oh, I've read so many. I have I mean, I used to literally like go on Amazon and just buy books and just take one with me on a road trip. So I've read like all the rock stuff, all the Guns N' Roses books. You know,
Anyone stand out?
Well, you know, I
recommend.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a ton. I really love Reckless Road, which was Mark Cantor's book, because he collected every single thing before Guns N' Roses made Appetite for Destruction. So every single flyer, every single picture, like he was there shooting for them, and he tells the stories of basically how the band came together and made that first album, which is obviously one of the greatest albums ever made. And I think that book is just, I don't think you could duplicate that book. You could never duplicate that book again. So that one's at the top of the list for me. But there's other ones like The Dirt, Motley Crue. It's a great book. I know Kevin probably loves that one, Hair Bands. You know,
I love that book actually.
It's a great book.
Yeah. Oral history, it's amazing.
And you know, a lot of those rock bios, I think a lot of them are really interesting. Even like Nikki Sixx's book is so dark, but it was really interesting, you know.
Yeah.
And but I also read all types of, you know, stuff on DJing, stuff on hip hop culture, all that kind of stuff. But I tend to really like the rock bios because I think probably because they're the craziest stories. You know?
Yeah. Do you have a favorite DJ other than AM?
For me?
Yeah.
Whoa, that's a loaded question.
Or you can, I'll give you an easier out. Think back to a performance you've seen, a specific DJ performance.
I remember one in particular that that kind of blew me away. I was into Fatboy Slim in the 90s. Really thought he was cool and different. I loved his album, and I remember I came to see him do a show at the Palladium, and I was fully expecting him, you know, this is all pre-digital, to play his hits. And he showed up. He showed up there, and his manager was in front of him and brought out a bottle of vodka and a carafe of orange juice, and he comes walking out with this little box, and it was all 45s, and it was all soul and classic 45s, and he proceeded, this is like one of his first times in America after, you know, his big album comes out, and he just played soul 45s for an hour, and I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Like, what balls, you know? He's like trying to break in America, and he doesn't give a crap about that. He's going to play what he likes to play. That was pretty amazing.
How'd the crowd take it?
They went with it pretty good. I think they were really excited about Crystal Method, who was coming on after, but the live show. But no, they were into it. I mean, they danced. There wasn't like a big backlash or anything. I think a couple people were probably disappointed, but I was like right up there watching him, and he was totally into it. I don't know what he was on or not on, but I mean, he was totally into it, and it was just a cool moment to show that, like, sometimes it just takes balls, basically. Yeah. To go up there and believe in your art. That's what he came up on, and that was the soul of his music. And he was going to come to America, and he wasn't going to give in. He was going to do what he believed in and what got him to that point. It was pretty awesome. And I think that even carried over into AM when AM was doing something completely against the grain. Yeah.
Kevin, favorite music video?
Music video.
Yours or otherwise?
Favorite experience, actually, of mine was probably doing the Chili Peppers. We built our own circus, camped out for 3 days, and had a lot of furry creatures and amazing, amazing. Nice. It's an amazing experience, actually. Yeah. We lived it for 3 days, so that's that. Probably.
What about one that's not yours? Like something that stands out as influential or meaningful to you?
Window liquor. Yeah. Actually, Chris Cunningham he's achieved guru status in my mind. So
cool. Yeah. Documentary? Is there a documentary that's been important to you?
Funny. Probably the thing that's standing out in my mind, maybe just because where we are right now in time, is the fog of war. Yeah. It's that's a window into a dark mind. Sure. Dark time. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's promote. Where do we find you guys and the film online? I'm kevinkerslake.com. You can find me that way, I guess.
Yeah, you can find me a few different places. My social networks are at DJ Kevin Scott, and there's also djkevinscott.com. Nice.
And where do we find the film online?
You won't find it till March, but you will find it on iTunes, Amazon, all those, Xbox, probably all those outlets.
Cool. Usual suspects. And there is a webpage for news and stuff. It's djamdoc.com. And also Twitter, Instagram, djamdoc as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, man, that was fun. I hope you enjoyed it like I did. Really enjoyed Kevin and Kevin, the Kevins as we call them. And I hope you'll join us next week for more Rebel Radio. Meanwhile, hit us up on iTunes. Leave us that 5-star review. iTunes, search for Rebel Radio. Click on those 5 stars. Do it now before you forget.